I was going to be appearing here, he wrote me that I had to promise him that I would bring up a topic that was a burning question on his mind. And I'm going to keep that promise and deliver this message. And if my 10 minutes runs out, that's fine. It's his message. His message is, tell them that the most important thing that you could discuss was dumping of toxic wastes in Somali waters and illegal fishing in Somali waters. And for Jama, this has begun to consume him and has become more important than anything else. He sees it as a symbol of everything that has gone wrong and uses it as a paradigm to understand Western intentions towards Somalia. And this needs to be said, I think, and I'm very happy to deliver this message to you. Now, to proceed from there, I think that there's a bigger lesson to be learned from what Jama is saying. And that is, there are many agendas of different actors in Somalia. And this conference is being dominated by the agenda that Ross Feingold talked about, the narrative of an insurgency with extremists and possible terrorist havens that has to be opposed and fought, and that we have a legitimate national unity government in Somalia now, and that's the way that we're going to defeat these terrorists. Just take a look at these agendas. Jama cares about the crimes committed by Western powers against Somalia. And Ross Feingold cares about terrorism. Take a look at it. These are competing narratives, and there are many narratives, and I think it's a dire mistake to simply take one interest-based narrative and attempt to interpret a political situation according to that narrative. Now let me move on to my next point, because I have a little time and I've prioritized my remarks. So let me say the next priority. Another message that wasn't delivered to me, it was delivered to the African Union and the Western powers, and that message was delivered by the Defense Minister of Nigeria about a week ago. And so let me read what the Defense Minister, Dr. Shatina Mustafa, had to say about Somalia. From our findings, there is no government on the ground. What we have are various groups controlling several areas. We will not send forces to enforce a peace that isn't present. It means you will fight to enforce peace there. So, if you go there, you would be fighting several groups. This is another counter-narrative. A counter-narrative to the one that Ken Mankhouse and Jabril were presenting to us. It's the narrative of a country that doesn't want to bolster up a peacekeeping mission. Obviously, it's also interest-based, but it's another way of looking at the picture entirely. There is no government on the ground. Now, what I'm supposed to be speaking about today is the evolution of the Islamic insurgency in Somalia. I can't speak about that honestly because I think that the insurgency is long buried in the sand. That it's not accurate to talk about an insurgency anymore. I think the situation has changed. And I think the situation now is a situation of civil conflict. And that civil conflict is decentered. That civil conflict is not between the protagonist, the new TFG, or National Unity Government, versus an armed opposition with extremists. No, it's a conflict that is decentered among antagonists. Why I call it a civil conflict, and let me bore you for 30 seconds with political science, well, not technical political science, just simple enough to understand. I call it civil conflict rather than an insurgency versus a government because we're talking about territories that are held by different groups. Not anarchy, not a single fight. Territories that are held by different groups. I've also seen, as I monitor Somalia, which is the way I do my research, monitor it day by day, I've seen battle lines forming that are drawn in contested zones and other zones of peace. So you're finding a civil conflict situation, not a chaotic situation as I had seen in previous months. The situation has changed. Third, interests are, as political scientists say, aggregating. In other words, there was a period of fragmentation, shifting alliances, back and forth. Now what we have is aggregation of different interests within these various territories where there's some solidification, there's some configuration, and we're beginning to see a picture. That picture, as I say, though, is decentered picture. So we have a true civil conflict situation, not civil war. But of course it has the dangers of civil war. And I think for the people here, it's real blindness if we see it as a Hollywood movie where we find the good guys in the white hats that are fighting against the insurgents in the black hats. That's the interest-laden Western narrative. It was given to you by Ross Feingold. We want to improve Somalia so we can have a better anti-terrorism policy. I think that is just bankrupt, does not answer the situation that's developed, and that maybe we ought to get our heads straight. Basically, we ought to look at all the various different actors' narratives. Look at how these actors with their narratives behave towards each other, and then try to see what the picture is by comparing those narratives as they act on them to the facts on the ground. If we do that, we might see something different than if we were acting according to narratives that are based on our own interests. The narrowness and tunnel vision, to me, are absolutely amazing. One thing I can say about a general picture within this situation of decentered civil conflict is that all of the domestic actors have a Islamic political formula. And so, whatever that formula might be, and of course that formula varies, I believe that one thing we can be pretty sure of is that Somalia is going to be dominated by Islamic political formulas. The second thing I would say that if the present situation of civil conflict persists and territories become solidified under various of the competing groups, the most likely future for Somalia is cantonization. Not a central government, not national reconciliation, cantonization. And cantonization could be fairly peaceful. But let me tell you, and I'll finish here, the correspondence that I get, because after I began this research, I must say one of the most wonderful things in my life, by far, is to have so many Somali cyber friends from all over the world who write me and tell me what they think and give me information. And they're all wonderful, dedicated people, and the people who I've met here in Washington are exactly the same way. I think they're the salt of the earth, and I really, really value them. Well, let me tell you, it might be disquieting, but this is what Somalilanders say: never again. We're not coming back. Puntlanders say federalism the way we want it, or nothing. And the others say, what can we do? And they don't know what to do. And so what happens is we have now territories being controlled by different groups. They're solidifying their administrations. And I think with the weight of Puntland and Somaliland for either separatism or some kind of federal decentralized, I call it confederal in terms of the history of the United States, some kind of confederal formula, you'll tend to have cantonization in the south central regions. You'll tend to have a central region. We see, Alusula Waljama is beginning to solidify control in Galgaduud. We find the Mukhtar Robo segment of Al-Shabaab solidifying itself in the southwest. We find the tripartite Shabaab, Anola, and Ras Kamboni administration in Kismayo and Juba beginning to solidify there. We find Hizbul Islam rising to greater effect in Lower Shabelle. We find Haran under the courts union, which is allied to Sheikh Sharif but has its own independence. And basically, what do we find allied with Sheikh Sharif? His own home region, Middle Shabelle. And if you take a look at it this way, the tendency now is cantonization. I don't know if it can be arrested or not. I have no prescriptions for policy to anybody. That's not why I'm here. I'm simply an analyst. I'm telling you what I see by monitoring the situation day by day. And if somebody wants to see how to reverse that tendency, I'll be just as happy to report that. And I thank you very, very much.